their side of the case. Like this one from Mrs. E. Boswell, a senior adoption worker. A small child cannot wait for years in limbo for his parents to mature. Every child has a right to a secure family of his own, and this can never be achieved in long-term care. The permanence of adoption, which clearly frightened so many of your viewers, is just the factor that makes adoption placements so successful. C. Taylor of Rochdale was apparently not reassured by thoughts like that. I'm of the opinion that any child who's taken into care is a loser from the time the authorities take over as parents and relatives. And finally, Joyce Pilkington from Pinner in Middlesex. I think, unfortunately, it has to be accepted that in many of these cases there's just no happy ending. There can't be because of the personalities involved. One's left trying to make the best of a bad job and wondering to what extent intervention helps. Well, as I said before, a lot of this week's letters were about personal experiences, many of them asking for our help. Well, we're clearly not able to give advice personally, but the most urgent of these cases have been passed on to people we think may be able to come up with some answers. If you feel in need of some advice, we've prepared a couple of leaflets listing some of the groups and agencies who may be able to help. You can get these by writing to us at Return Call, BBC, PO Box 27, Oxford Road, Manchester. But please enclose a stamped addressed envelope if you want those leaflets. Well, this week in Brass Tacks, we turn to the subject of trade unions and the closed shop. Is it an infringement of personal freedom to be forced to join a trade union? And can industry survive without the closed shop? That's the live Brass Tacks debate tonight at the slightly later time of 10 o'clock. I hope you'll be able to join me then.
Well, in 10 minutes, Jack Scott continues his series Under the Weather with a look at the anticyclones that bring us blue skies, sometimes droughts, and fog and frost in winter. First, the mid-evening news with Kenneth Kendall.
Government aid for Liverpool. A big development project is announced for the old sugar refinery site. More plans for bringing new work to Liverpool have been announced today. The Environment Secretary, Mr. Michael Heseltine, said the site of the Tate and Lyle refinery, which closed 6 months ago, is to be completely cleared and redeveloped with industrial units and possibly housing and leisure facilities. Mr. Heseltine made the announcement when he returned to Liverpool, where he recently completed an inquiry into the Toxteth riots. A report from our northern industrial correspondent, Felicity Goody.
The 22-acre site of Tate and Lyle's sugar refinery is in the heart of Liverpool. Its closure in April added 1,500 more to the number out of work in a city where unemployment levels have already topped 18%. Tate and Lyle blamed common market sugar policies, and attempts by MPs and unions to save it failed. But the company did offer to look at ways of redeveloping existing buildings, and together with the local authorities had started to make plans. Mr. Heseltine has overturned all that. Following his stay in the city, he went to Tate and Lyle and persuaded them to hand over the entire site for wholesale clearance and redevelopment by an appropriate development agency. But how many jobs will be created as a result, he couldn't say.
I am determined not to give false hopes. There are very serious long-term problems, and the prospects facing many of the companies in this area are extremely serious. And so one is, if you like, battling against the tide. It would be quite wrong to try and pretend that what I've announced so far, or indeed what I've announced today, is of the scale that will actually match that long-term deterioration.
But Mr. Heseltine said any opportunity to revitalise Liverpool must be taken. Tate and Lyle will effectively be handing over £1 million for the benefit of Merseyside. That's the value of the site, plus a small contribution to the redevelopment. It's hoped demolition work will begin within the next few months.
The government is to provide £27 million to help pay for repairs to damage done in the recent riots. The total bill is put at £45 million in the districts where the riots occurred, chiefly Toxteth, Moss Side, Southall and Brixton. So, as one of our Westminster staff points out, local authorities will still have to find considerable sums of money, either by levying extra rates or by some other means. British shipbuilders have won a Canadian contract worth nearly £60 million. It's for 3 bulk carriers to be built at the Govan shipyard on the Clyde. The ships are designed so they can be used both on the Great Lakes and at sea. Work on them will secure 3,000 jobs for the next 2 years. Police searching for double killer Alan Reeve, who escaped from Broadmoor yesterday, are now also looking for one of his regular visitors, 30-year-old Patricia Maria Ford from Reading, who's described as of hippie appearance. The police say they think she's likely to be with Reeve, who's asked permission to marry her. But how dangerous is he now? Tony Skase asked Reeves' parents.
Oh, it's not dangerous at all. No.
We don't think so.
No.
What do you think he will do now?
Well, I can't really be sure. Perhaps he'll try and stay free as long as possible to prove that he is fit and well and deserves a chance for someone to listen to him.
What advice would you give him?
I'd say, son, use the brains that God's given you, and please don't undo any good that we've tried to do for you.
Stay out of trouble.
Stay out of trouble. Please, please, God.
This evening, the police looking for Mr. Reeve and Miss Ford say they're now seeking a light blue Ford Escort car, registration number JOX569W, which they believe Miss Ford may be driving. They say it was hired in Reading a few days ago. The French Defense Minister, Charles Ernu, has said that the Soviet Union has experimented with a version of the neutron bomb, but he later made it clear that he didn't mean they'd exploded such a device. His statement comes amid strong Soviet criticism of the American decision to manufacture the warheads. And the US Secretary for Defense, Caspar Weinberger, has been talking about the opposition some European governments face over the possible deployment of the bomb.
But I think basically the worry is that this gives some sort of ammunition to the left wing. Actually, that is a product, I think, of a very effective Soviet propaganda campaign against this weapon, which is an extremely useful and effective defensive weapon, particularly against masses of tanks. And the Soviets have an enormous imbalance of tanks in their favor, something like 46,000 to 11,000 on the Central Front.
The 13-day-old Mongol girl, who was given a life-saving operation after the appeal court had overruled her parents' wishes, is to go to foster parents when she leaves hospital in a few days. But her long-term future won't be decided until there have been more discussions with her parents. A statement issued by solicitors said the baby's parents will be explaining their own views publicly, seriously, and at length, but probably not for at least a week. Francis Coverdale has been visiting a family who know the problems of having a Mongol child.
It's exactly 12 years since Jenny Stafford was born and the news was broken to her parents that she was a Mongol. Though a happy child with plenty of friends, she needs constant attention. She's fortunate in that she gets it. Not all such children do. As an official of the Downs Children's Association, Mrs. Felicity Stafford has come into contact with hundreds of Mongol children and knows all too well the pressures on their parents. So how would she react now in the same position?
Now, of course, I know the good side as well as the bad side. I know the fun and enjoyment that we have had with Jenny, but I also remember very clearly the bitterness and the upset at the time of her birth, and also the feeling I had then of the lack of support of society in general in their decision that these children should live. And I feel the same way now. I can understand these parents' views, and I do feel their wishes should have been respected.
A Portsmouth man who won a record £100,000 on the horses has been to collect his winnings, but as Bruce Parker reports, he kept the bookies waiting before receiving the reward for his stake of just £1.30.
Until this morning, the betting shop had no idea who the record winner was. They were confident, though, that the anonymous punter would turn up sometime this morning to collect his £100,000, all for a stake of £1.30 and made up of 7 5-penny each-way bets. But it was a shy George Talbot, a retired Portsmouth dockyard worker, who turned out to be the lucky man, clearly wishing he could have put an X on his betting slip for no publicity. Mr. Talbot is a widower who's often placed bets in this particular shop, astute enough to have paid 10% tax on his stake before the races were run, rather than on his winnings, 13 pence instead of £10,000.
Now for the main points of the news again, with subtitles for the hard of hearing. The Environment Secretary, Mr. Michael Heseltine, has announced more plans to create new jobs in Liverpool. The site of the Tate & Lyle sugar refinery, which closed 6 months ago, is to be completely cleared and redeveloped. The government is to provide £27 million to help pay for repairs to the damage done in the recent riots around the country. British shipbuilders have won a contract worth £60 million to build 3 bulk carriers for Canada. And a survey of nearly 400 firms and businesses in the southeast has suggested a new optimism about the state of the economy. The London Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which commissioned the survey, says business confidence has risen considerably in the last few months. The search is continuing for double killer Alan Reeve, who escaped from Broadmoor yesterday. Police are now also looking for a 30-year-old woman friend named as Patricia Maria Ford from Reading, who had visited Reeve regularly. And tonight, police say they're looking for a light blue Ford Escort, registration number JOX569W, which they believe Miss Ford may be driving. The French Defense Minister has said the Soviet Union has already made experiments with a neutron bomb. Yesterday, the Soviets criticized President Reagan for committing the United States to production of the weapon. Newsnight at 10:45 tonight visits rehearsals for a new play about a speech therapist and a deaf girl. The leading actress in the play, Children of a Lesser God, is herself deaf. Well, that's all from me. I look now at the weather.
Well, much of England and Wales and eastern Scotland will have a good deal of dry weather tomorrow with sunny periods, although northwestern parts of England and Wales may be rather cloudy at times. The rest of Scotland and Northern Ireland, on the other hand, will be cloudy with rain and drizzle on and off throughout the day. Much of the rain will be light, but in northwest Scotland there may be some heavier bursts. Temperatures will range from 17 degrees centigrade, that's 63 degrees Fahrenheit in the northwest, to 23 degrees centigrade, that's 73 degrees Fahrenheit in the southeast. Well, that's tomorrow's weather, but for a more detailed explanation of the whys and wherefores of our climate and what really goes on under the weather, here's Jack Scott.
Hello, we're going to take a look at high pressure, the anticyclone, the feature that most folk regard as a good weather sign and what most sun lovers are looking for on the chart in the summertime. Now this is the source of frosts. May I wish you a very good night.
Well, in next week's programme, Jack Scott will be looking at the problems of really long-term forecasting. Can we calculate the changes in the climate and could the Ice Age return? Under the weather next Monday at the same time. Brass Tacks tonight looks at the closed shop. Dockers at Felixstowe are among Britain's 5 million people who have to join a union if they want a job. But 3 former British Rail employees, sacked 5 years ago for not joining a union, have taken their case to the European Court of Human Rights. On Thursday, the court is expected to declare that closed shop arrangements violate human rights. The court's verdict could have a major impact on industrial relations in Britain. But this may not save the job of this Meals on Wheels lady, who could be sacked by Walsall Council for not becoming a union member. Brass Tacks looks at the closed shops at Felixstowe and Walsall and asks unions whether they'll obey the verdict. Brass Tacks tonight at 10 o'clock here on 2. Panorama on BBC1 in about 3 minutes presents a look at Pakistan's attempt to develop the Islamic world's first nuclear weapon. A more recent assessment of events there following the award-winning programme you may remember seeing some months ago. Here on 2 now, the Secret Army act out another small drama from the Second World War. Next week, the young Welsh singer Iris Williams, whose recording of He Was Beautiful was such a success last year, begins the first of a new series of 4 programmes. That's at 9 o'clock next Monday evening.
A great place to start, isn't it? Right, and 1, 2.
In BBC2's Festival of Music tomorrow, Simon Rattle gives a workshop performance of Sir Michael Tippett's concerto for double-string orchestra and talks to the composer about his influences.
It would be Django Reinhardt, Hot Club of Paris, and that period.
So not really the blues singing?
No, yes, no. I don't even know that I'd heard the blues by then. I'm not quite sure. I wasn't so much interested in the blues, which came much later, but in the polyrhythm. You say that it went round and round in threes against a 4-beat. That was what fascinated me.
Quaver is a little later. If you can ba-dam. Could you put a little accent on the quaver rather than the minima? Great.
The blues note is not only it really is this curious business of a major and minor third put together and produced very often in this way.
So then ba.
Simon Rattle and the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra in workshop tomorrow at 9:25 here on 2.
Yeah, cellos, you're a bit behind on that semi each time. Can you go really with Jeremy? Once more.
And now on to Eric Robson and this week's Brass Tacks.
Hello. Evening. You can, of course, write to return call. We'll give you the address in a moment. But for the moment, from all of us, until the same time next week, goodbye.
And if you'd like to put your views on the brass tacks closed shop debate, here's the address to send your letters to. Return call, BBC, PO Box 27, Oxford Road, Manchester. And Eric Robson will be back with return call next Monday at 7:25. And coping with unemployment is the subject of Radio 4's morning programme Tuesday Call at 9:05. The lines will be open for your calls on 01, if you're outside London, 580-4411 from 8 o'clock in the morning. And there to answer your questions will be Guy Dauncey, a writer on unemployment problems, and Graham Reed of the Manpower Services Commission. That's on Radio 4 at 9:05 tomorrow morning. And in a lighter vein, those two arch chumps from Hollywood's vintage years, Laurel and Hardy, star in Any Old Port at 11:30 this evening. First on BBC2, Newsnight.
Air traffic to and from Europe and the United States is thrown into chaos by Canadian air traffic controllers acting in sympathy with their striking colleagues.